O Lord, our hope and our Redeemer, please open our hearts to receive your message for us today. Amen. Well, the Christmas lights are coming down. Christmas has come to an end. We are celebrating the end of the 12 days of Christmas and the time that the wise men came to worship the newborn King. But as the wise men come and we celebrate Epiphany, this also means that we are entering the dark, gray days of winter here in Wisconsin. The days are very short and the nights are very long. Darkness falls early with the setting of the sun, and it can seem so cold and so long before the sun rises again in the east. We have cold skies, we have gray skies. We can go days, even weeks, without seeing clear sunshine sometimes. And aside from the physical darkness here in Wisconsin, many of us face other types of darkness: mental illness, fear, anxiety, job insecurity, financial problems, broken relationships. It feels like the light switches are turning off around us this time of year. We are starting a new worship series today, and we are going to be thinking about the millions of people who struggle with seasonal affective disorder during the dark days of winter. But we're going to be looking beyond just the mental health side of this to the fact that a lot of us have set our spiritual life to the side and have not made it a priority in our lives as well. You could call this a spiritual affective disorder. And when we set our spiritual life aside, it often affects our mental health and our physical health. How do we bring these things together? Maybe we are struggling with anxiety or depression in our lives. Maybe we have a loved one or someone who is close to us who is struggling. We want to look at the spiritual practices that we can use to bring all the parts of our life together into wholeness and into health. Our mental capacity, our mental health is affected how we feel, how world around us is tumbling about, how the weather is. There is so much that affects us. But at the core, we are children of God, and God has created us, and God fills us with a light that comes from the source, from God Himself. We will not be talking about replacements for medical care. There are times when our mental health needs the medical interventions of caregivers who have been trained and have access to therapies and medicines that can help us. So if you have a severe mental health issue, we do encourage you to seek the medical support that you need. But what we will be talking about is how we come together as a community, how each of us is a gift of God that can bring God's light into the world to shine a light on the blahs that we feel, especially this time of year. There are experiences that we have each day, exercises that we can take where we can feel the presence of God in our lives, that we can be filled with God's radiance. And through that, we are filled with light because we believe in God. This first week, we are looking at a passage from the Bible that encourages us to arise and shine. And let us live into that this week. When we look at our reading from Isaiah, Isaiah is talking to a group of Israelites after the exile. Jerusalem has been destroyed. The temple has been destroyed. The people of Israel probably had post-traumatic stress disorder, although they may not have had that term for it. The people of Israel have been removed from their home. They are having to put together life in a new place. They probably were having a hard time getting out of bed each day. Now, there are times when we feel like it is hard to get out of bed. It is warm in bed these days. It is often dark when we are waking up. Now, it is sometimes a seasonal passing depression that we feel, but some of us have been feeling something that lasts much longer. I was recently talking to my kids about some of the experiences that I had, especially in my 30s, when I felt a deep, truly black depression come upon me. It felt like literally a black veil was coming down before my eyes. And I found it very difficult to get through each day. And I needed the help of therapists and psychiatrists. I needed the support of medications to get me through a really difficult time after the death of my mother. No matter what is making it hard for us to get out of bed, maybe it's burnout, maybe it's depression, maybe we've been through some grief or some trauma, whatever it is, God has promised to be by our side, and God has given us support networks to help us through. I was just in a conversation earlier today with someone who was talking about some of the people in his life, and we talked about the fact that one of the groups of people that is most struggling in our country right now are white, middle-aged men. Now, some of you might be surprised because this isn't the group of people that often is lifted up as a group that is struggling. But when you look at the statistics about suicide in the United States today, white middle-aged men are the group with the highest rates of suicide. In 2017, 70% of the suicides that we experienced as a nation, the loss of these people, were white middle-aged men. They have a 3 times higher rate than other groups of people to experience suicide. What is going on in our nation that we are struggling to support the people around us in their times of need? What is going on that we are struggling to share with each other, the exercises, the ways that we can get through each day connected to God and connected to the people around us, where we have what we need to feel the joy of life? So let us think about the ways we find light in our times of depression and anxiety and struggles, and how we can bring light to loved ones who are struggling. Now, I recently came across a new Jewish translation of the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, most of us call it. This is just one part of it. It is a commentary, and there's a lot of footnotes with all sorts of information in it, and it looks like a really massive Bible when you look at it this way. This is recent translation from the Hebrew into English. And I want to raise up a couple passages from our reading from Isaiah today, because this particular translation has an interesting way of looking at this. Chapter 60 of Isaiah says, "Rise, shine, for your light has come." And this is what many of us have heard from this passage in our Christmas readings. "And the glory of the Lord has dawned over you." This is the part that I think is so beautiful. The glory of the Lord has dawned over you. "For look, darkness covers the earth, and thick mists the people. And upon you the Lord shall dawn, and his glory shall be seen upon you." This is a little bit of a different translation than we're used to. We are used to, "Arise, shine, shine, for the Lord's glory is upon you." The idea of the Lord's glory dawning on us is a different way of thinking about it. Dawning has a beautiful sense of motion, of action. As we saw with this video background that I've been using, we see the sun rising during the dawn. God's presence is over us. Dawning means it comes above us and it flows over us. The other part of dawning is that it comes every day. It is regular. It is dependable. This is what we can think of with God when we are struggling with whatever darkness is in our lives, whatever blues we are feeling. God is going to dawn over us every single day. God's presence will be over us, will surround us like the comfort of a weighted blanket. But the other thing that I thought about when I was reading this passage about God's light dawning over us is we have another use for dawning. We often talk about someone's facial expressions as a new idea dawns upon them, as joy dawns upon them. I found this great video. Let's take a look at a child and how a smile dawns across their face. As we watch this smile come across this child's face, it makes us feel good. We feel a sense of light when we see this child smile. God's dawning comes over us like the joy of a smile crossing a face. Now, as you go through the Bible, there are places in the Bible, like we just read through Leviticus with the daily Bible readings, where it seems like there's a list of punishments for the time that we fall short in our obedience of God's commandments. And there are people who've had experiences in church and with God where it seems like the punishments are the main focus. Do the right thing or you're going to be punished by God. I would like to lift up today this passage from Isaiah. And instead of focusing on doing the right thing to avoid punishment, what if our relationship with God was instead doing the right thing so that we can see the joy of God dawning on God's face, where we can feel like we are under the glory of God dawning over us with the joy of that smile on the child's face? What if our lives made God smile more often? I think that is a beautiful thing to hold on to when we are in times where we may feel like we are struggling. What are the daily decisions we can make that make God smile, that make God's glory dawn upon us with the joy that God has for having created us and being in relationship with us and being partners with us in bringing God's light to the world? God's light is where we see the joy. So what can we do to stay connected to God, where God's light is coming through us and we are inspired and strengthened to work with God to make the world a better place? When we think back to the Israelites that Isaiah was talking to, everything had been destroyed. And I was thinking about, just what is this like? Because we can talk about them being taken to Babylon, and that just does not mean a whole lot to me today. But I am here in Suamico in the greater metropolitan area of Green Bay, Wisconsin. What if the Canadians invaded? What if the Canadians invaded and leveled Green Bay? No more Lambeau Field, everything is gone. And what if they took us and sent us on buses and planes and relocated us to Toronto? That is what the Israelites were feeling. That is the darkness they were facing. That was what they were trying to deal with day after day after day. They struggled to get out of bed, but God's glory was dawning over them, and they found a way to make it through their exile day after day until Nehemiah and Ezra and the others were able to return, and they were able to start rebuilding their lives. We can arise from bed each day, just like the Israelites figured out how to do. We can reach our arm out from the warm blankets, we can turn off the alarm, and we can get out of bed, and we can feel God's glory dawning upon us, a new day with new opportunities for God's glory to flow through us to the people around us. Now, I said we were going to talk about spiritual practices or spiritual exercises. We're not going to be doing push-ups or squats, but some of us think of spiritual practices as going to communion, as baptism, the sacraments of the church, maybe getting on our knees and praying, and some of us feel like we are not really good at this. But today I would like to offer, and we've handed out some cards, and there will be copies of this online. What if getting out of bed becomes a spiritual practice. What does it mean for something to be a spiritual practice? The writer Richard Rohr has a great definition. A spiritual practice is any act habitually entered into with your whole heart that awakens and deepens and sustains within you a contemplative experience of the holiness of the present moment. It's nothing special other than being present in the moment and feeling the holiness of creation and God in that moment. So we can make getting out of bed a spiritual practice if we are aware that God is with us as we get out of bed, as we take the first step into our day. So these cards today that we are handing out for you to use this week, they say, "Arise, shine, for your light has come." And on the back, it has several suggestions for an arising practice this week. Where can you put this card that when you get out of bed this morning, when you brush your teeth, when you prepare yourself for your day, you can look at this and there is a prayer on the backside for you to use to be aware of God's presence and holiness as you arise and start your day. Getting out of bed can be a contemplative experience. Now, we talk about some spiritual practices like Lectio Divina, which is a Latin word for reading with divine intent, God's words in the Bible. But getting out of bed can be a Visio Divina. We are looking with our eyes to see God's divine presence at the beginning of our day. This winter, I invite you in the coming weeks to try these spiritual practices, to get some exercise of bringing God's light into your heart, into your life, and maybe helping to shed some light on the blues that you may be experiencing. Every week we will have another card for you to try. Now, we think about light as something that we can flip a switch and we have light, or the light goes away. And sometimes that seems really easy to do, but sometimes, depending on the mental health issues we are feeling, flipping that switch can be more than we can handle. As you look around today, we have a number of lamps here showing us some light. It is a fun way to think of the different ways that God brings light into our life. But the final thing I want us to think about is that all of these lamps have come from different households. Our faith community, our church came together when our worship designer Stephanie said, "Hey, please drop off some lights. We're going to be doing something special in January." And together we came here. Now, if we just had one light, yeah, that might be interesting. But having a bunch of lights, I look at this and I am reminded that each one of us has a piece of the light that God brings to our world. None of us has all the light. But when we are together and we each bring our piece of light, we put something beautiful together. We have soft, warm light here that makes us feel good right now. But it is making us feeling good because it's many lights from many places, and none of them look the same. None of them have quite the same light coming out of them. And that is the beauty of the church. A group of people that God has gathered together where we receive God's light, God's glory dawns upon us, and we bring God's light into the world. And that light is stronger when we bring it together. When we each bring the peace that God has given us, and together our light is stronger and our light reaches further. We are not alone during a cold Wisconsin winter. We are here together to warm each other, to encourage each other, to strengthen each other. We each have a light to bring, and each of us together work to bring God's light to new people. This coming Saturday, we're going to have a special event where a whole bunch of us are going to come together, and we are going to try to pack at least 9,000 meals, possibly more, in just 3 hours. The interesting thing about this is that we have the light of enough food in our lives. And we have generous members who have raised $3,000. We have generous community neighbors who are bringing their labor and their time to us on Saturday to help us pack these meals. We are using our compassion to share the food that we have abundant here with people in places where food is not abundant. Our meals are going to be going places like Ukraine and Syria and Congo, places where people are facing the darkness of war and conflict, people who are facing the darkness of starvation. We are going to share a bit of what God has given us with people who are facing a different kind of darkness than we are. This is how we flip the switch. We come together, we have strength together, we turn on the light when we are together working to share God's light with our neighbors. So I encourage you this month to choose to be part of a group, to switch on the light as part of a group to grow together. Choose to get involved, flip the switch to be part of a project or a program that is going to be bringing light to other people. Choose to be together and feel the light of God and share the light of community. Let us work together as God intended us when He created us. Amen.